Welcome back, guys. I've got a question for you. What happens to your business if your top customer walks away? Or if your key supplier raises their prices? Or if a critical team member quits? Most owners I work with haven't thought about it this way, but the biggest, or at least one of the biggest, risks to your business and your exit might be your dependence. If more than 15 to 20% of your revenue comes from a single customer, if one supplier controls your ability to deliver to your clients, or if your business can't run smoothly without one person, maybe even you, that's what we call dependency risk. And it can tank your valuation, even if your revenue and profit look strong on paper. So the Switzerland structure is all about neutrality and independence, not just in politics, but in how your business operates. Okay, so inspired by Switzerland's famous neutrality, this driver looks at how dependent your business is on any one customer, supplier, or employee. And just to bring you back up to speed, if you haven't caught the last two episodes, we're on a series right now of the 8 drivers of company value. And so today we're talking about one of those drivers, the Switzerland structure. So a company that relies too heavily on any single stakeholder is riskier for a buyer. And as you know, if you've listened, any kind of risk, well, that's a valuation killer, right? It affects what your business is worth. So by contrast, though, companies with the Switzerland structure in place are more resilient to disruption. They're seen as more transferable and scalable and attractive to more buyers, right? Especially strategic acquirers who are willing to pay a premium if they're able to add some low risk assets. But without this structure, even if you have a strong business, you can see your valuation discounted, or worse, maybe even scare buyers off. Okay. So our team, as you may know, uses the value builder to assess where your business stands. And one of the core components that we take into account is the Switzerland structure and where you sit along that driver. So here's some of the things that we're looking at, which may be obvious based on what we've talked about so far, but of course, customer diversification. So we want to make sure that you have no single customer that accounts for more than 15% of your revenue. And if you do, or regardless, we want to make sure we're exploring different verticals, niches, or geographic markets where we can spread out that customer risk. We want to look at supplier redundancy. So we don't want to have all your eggs in one supplier's basket. We need to help you build relationships with multiple vendors, even if there's just one dominant player today. We got to think of this as supply chain insurance. And then internally, we want to look at employee cross training, right? So if one team member leaving would cripple the operations of the business, you've obviously got a big problem. And this is quite common. So it's time to invest in SOPs or standard operating procedures for your business. It's time to do cross training so you don't have that key person risk in your business. So here's a couple real world examples or a few case studies pulled from real businesses that demonstrate this driver in action. So Tesla started out relying almost entirely on Panasonic for its battery supply. But over time, they've diversified and even began producing their own batteries. So this has boosted their resilience and the valuation of the company. Netflix, another company I'm sure you've heard of, they once depended just on third-party content. But as you probably know now, they've invested heavily in original programming, so they're creating control and independence of what they're supplying to their clients or customers. So these big names provide a model, but they're bringing the same principles that apply to your service-based business, whether you run a law firm, a consultancy, marketing agency. Diversifying your dependencies makes your business more sellable and more valuable. And you may be thinking, hey, yeah, I know I just have one big customer, but I understand and I have created such a solid relationship that there's really no risk here. Or, yeah, there's only one supplier, but I know they're always going to want to sell to me. You may feel like you know something a buyer doesn't, but you're not going to be able to convince a buyer of that. And at the very least, what's going to happen is a buyer may say, okay, but in order for this deal to go through, you need to be able to keep that those supplier terms, or you need to keep that client for an X number of years, and you need to keep working in the business for those years to make sure that happens, right? Or you need to be able to diversify your customer base in order to, solidify the deal. So this may not be a deal breaker, but it's probably going to affect valuation. And if it doesn't affect the valuation, it's definitely going to affect terms of the deal. Okay. So just to kind of recap here, the Switzerland structure reduces risk by avoiding over reliance on any one customer, any one supplier, and any one employee. Buyers are willing to pay a premium for resilient, independent businesses. And if you haven't figured out where, if you have the Switzerland structure in place or you're not sure, the value builder score that we do can identify the gaps in that driver along with the other 7 drivers and start to help us create a roadmap for you to increase your value by enhancing the 8 drivers of company value. So if you want to reach out and learn more about the value builder, just shoot me an email, info@retirementplanningsimplified.ca. And otherwise, I look forward to checking back in with you guys in a couple of weeks on the next driver of company value.